Welcome to the Organizational Transformation Kung Fu Podcast with your hosts, Sandi and Jennifer Long.
Welcome to another episode of Organizational Transformation Kung Fu. I'm here with Jen Long from Own Up in Denver, Colorado. Hey, Jen.
Hey, Sandi in Toronto, Canada with Satori Consulting. How are you?
Yes, I am so good. I loved our podcast, which seems to be Podcast Sundays. And today we're excited because we're going to be talking about the leader as coach and what it means for organizations to really transform their cultures into a coaching culture once the leader is set as that coaching figure. And so we wanted to share sort of some thoughts on that today.
Exactly. Because leader as results driver, leader as dictator, leader as
command control,
just visionary, command and control. No, not anymore.
No, right? We've come a long way from what a manager or leader looked like, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, even 20 years ago. It's been a slow transition to get where we are now, where so many organizations are realizing that taking a coaching approach, an inclusive coaching approach, is so much more productive.
Yes. And I would say that based on this post-pandemic environment where we are looking at a labor force where there's a lot of new talent, there's a lot of green talent coming into industries they've never been in, right? And a lot of seasoned talent that's leaving. And developing people is a struggle. And that is why I think this doing the pod on this right now is relevant, because I think a lot of leaders need to, if you're not already doing a coaching approach, it's time to kind of sit back and evaluate how you get started to do that.
Yeah, I think one of our last podcasts, we were talking about this whole phenomenon around people, and it has changed a lot. And with the change, I think organizations need to change more quickly than they have around this notion of being more of a coaching philosophy, because of the fact that the churn is there and people will change. If it's not aligned to people's values, they're just going to leave. And so we want to make sure that we are managing in a way that is productive and inspiring, I guess, for employees.
Right. And how do you connect to your people, right? How are you connecting and creating capacity to be able to deliver on your vision, to be able to deliver on your organizational goals, to be able to deliver? And this capacity building thing is part of what coaching is about, is how do you look at people through the eyes of skill sets and behaviors and potential instead of job roles and descriptions.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, both and really.
I was reading a Forbes article that was written in 2020, so a couple of years ago, but it was talking about what would leaders look like in 2030. And they talked about the mindsets and the skills that they would need. I don't know if you've read it, but they talked about that from the mindset perspective, they needed to be global citizens. They needed to be servant leaders. They needed to be chefs, and they needed to be explorers. So I love these words, right? Because they're not words that we would use in traditional sense of leading. And the skills, number one skill, coach. Number two was, I can't read it now. A futuristic, technology, a teenager, a translator, and a Yoda. So emotionally intelligent, in touch with your like a master communicator, in touch with technology, and most importantly, motivating, inspiring, engaging their teams, caring about each person as an individual, and as you say, not as a job description or a role. So I thought that was it. So that was a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I'm curious what chef is and what teenager is.
So the technology teenager is being really curious about technology and not being afraid of it, and getting to know it, right? Being in there. And
what's the latest app?
Right. The chef is about balancing the most essential ingredients, so business and humanity and technology at the same time. So we can't be completely driven by technology. And a lot of my organizations, it's a very much a digital focus. We need to transform digitally. We need to transform digitally. And, the cautionary tale there is that they need to coach their people to come along that same continuum. So it's not an or, it's an and.
Right, right. And I think that it feels like this just more humanist approach, right? Of your people, your companies really are only as good as the people that you've got sitting in the seats and the kind of expertise you're creating, and that you have to not just have a vision for your organization, you have to have a vision for your people.
Mm-hmm.
Talent management, right? Really structuring how are we onboarding? How are we developing? How are we engaging? And recognizing these people for who they are, what they bring in, what kind of experience we're creating together. And
Right.
I think a lot of times companies want to own that experience. And I'm like, that's a two-way street, right? They're engaged in the experience as well. So what are you encouraging from them, and how are you giving them permission, as well as what kind of landscape are you setting?
Right. That sort of takes that command and control out of the equation, right? Because you are allowing people to be innovators in their own space. And I think it really talks to a learning organization and allowing them to learn in a way that is best suits them, rather than, this is the next widget that you need to learn. And I find, and I think we've maybe talked about this before, but a lot of the organizations that I deal with, when the staff push back, their pushback is always around, I don't have enough training. And if we took training out of the equation, what would the pushback be? And I would suggest that it's not more training. It's, I need to be heard. I need to be seen. I need people to celebrate me, and I need to see it happening all over the organization.
Right, right. The big practice that's a deficit, I think, for so many leaders is that encouraging the heart, right? That's a Kouzes and Posner framework of one of the 5 disciplines of leadership, and their research around, do you take the time? What is your discipline around recognizing around, and it's not just praise and attaboy and that kind of stuff, but it's really, how do people know they're seen? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And what is that conversation like? And how often are you having it? Because that is the conversation of inspiration. That is the conversation that creates momentum. That is the conversation that says, here's all the things you're doing right. Keep doing these things. This is working. And that's when, especially when you're in these cultures where it's trying, where you've got leaders who are green as well as talent that's green, being able to encourage each other to say, we're the ones who've got to fix this, or we're the ones who are going to do this differently, or, how are you creating that energy?
Yeah. Yeah. So, you and I fully believe in this, and we talk about it all the time. How do we start? Let's help our listeners understand where to begin. So I'm a CEO of an organization. I want to make change, or I'm a middle manager who wants to start trying to push change on an organization that I may not have that much influence. Like, where do we start? What do you think?
I think part of it is understanding, right? Leaders' self-awareness. What are the things I'm doing that diminish others, that get in the way of me being able to be a coach? Where am I driving and knowing and dictating instead of leaning into the building of capacity, right? And when am I not creating this space for the critical thinking? When am I not creating this space for the reflection of how are we doing what we're doing, as opposed to, we need to hit the bottom line and let me be clear on what the goals are, and setting the horizon as opposed to setting the playing field.
Right. And so I want to stop there and just sort of be that devil's advocate, because, remember, I'm a manager, I'm busy, I got goals to hit. Right. And so you're painting a picture of, I need to take more time and have these conversations that really don't feel like I'm going to hit my goals with them. Is that what you're suggesting?
Right. I'm suggesting you evaluate that. Yeah. Because if you don't ever create the space, you're going to be the one who's in the firefight. Right. And this goes to how you choose to spend the time. And if you consistently spend the time in achieving the outcomes and rescuing your people, or setting a pace of what that needs to be, or uh, fixing their work. What are you teaching them really?
Mm-hmm.
You don't trust them. They're not, you're going to need to be there for a lot longer to learn it. Right.
Yeah.
And, I think that's the thing that we don't take into consideration is when we choose our comfort of I need what I need over
Right.
what do my people need, then we diminish them in their ability to actually engage and grow at the rate we need them to.
So it may feel, in sort of intuitively, that it's going to take more time, and maybe it's not going to be as fruitful. But we're here, both of us, to say it works, right? So how does an organization transform? Beginning as they have to make a decision, right? They need to really take stock in what it looks like today from a culture. From a coaching culture, or just a culture in general, a culture, whether it's their sales culture or their overall culture, of what it is that they are celebrating as successes, and really define what it is that they want. Because without defining it, it sort of becomes this: I might be doing it over here, you might be doing it over there, but we need everybody sort of marching in the same way. It's hard to have camps that are doing well and camps that are sort of back in the day leadership.
Right. So coaching is a competency, right? What does that look like? How do we define it? How do we talk about coaching? And do we create space for coaching as a practice, right? It's one of those things that do coaching skills hit your leadership development models? Do coaching skills hit your performance agreements, right? Am I measuring, am I looking for how much time do you spend coaching your people, right? One of the things I'm always asking executives is, what do your one-on-ones look like? Do you even have one-on-ones, and what are you talking about? What happens in that environment? And what's the frequency?
Yeah.
So that they can start to get clear on what is their own expectation of that, and how does that impact the relationships and the development and the opportunity to have discussions on growth and where they struggle and what they want to do about where they're struggling, because those are the opportunities. And a lot of time that is low hanging fruit. Those are easy conversations, short sprints of being shoulder to shoulder with somebody or putting them with a mentor, you know what I mean? The development thing is a sprint. It's not this, I got to invest in this person for a year.
Right. And I find in that it's like, who's setting the agenda and the tone of the meeting, and what's the role of the coachee in this, right? And I like to say it's the coachee's meeting. Those one-on-ones, those coaching moments, are for the coachee to express where they need help, what they need from the organization, what they need for their manager, as opposed to the manager coming in saying, you didn't do this, or you did do this and you did do this, but like, who owns the agenda? And I think it's the coachee's agenda, right?
100%.
There's parameters in which we work, and we have expectations around that. But I know what I need as a person, as working for an organization. I need to be able to have a safe space to ask for it.
Right. And I think this is a piece of the leader as coach that leaders miss at times, is that by the person, the coachee owning the agenda, what they think they need, where they're frustrated, where they're getting stuck, you've got somebody who is engaged. You've got somebody who's willing to learn, to take on the skills you're looking to get, right? It's you get real clear real quick on who's in and who's out in terms of wanting to do more, perform higher, whatever that might be. And it takes the pressure off you as the leader to be like, well, what? I don't have time to figure out what to develop. It's like, you don't need to figure it out. They will tell you.
Yes. And I always say, if you're spending more time figuring out what to speak about at a meeting, that you're doing it backwards, right? Because the coachee really needs to spend their time thinking about, wow, I've got this one-on-one time with my manager. They're going to give me this half hour, 15 minutes, an hour, whatever it is. And I need to use that time wisely and get what I need from it. And I would say, if it's training, it doesn't belong there. There's a place for training. There's a place, but this coaching is different from training, and they're often used sort of interchangeably, because training is the easier of the two. If you move this from here to there, then you'll do it better. But training has no place in a coaching session.
Right? Because it's not they're not confused about a process, right? They can get that in the training. They're not confused about that kind of thing. It's more the deeper learning around what's the critical thinking that goes into how I use the process, right? What's
Mhm.
the organizational knowledge I don't have because I haven't got the experience yet? It's when you're in that coaching environment, those are different questions, and there's different guidance there in terms of how do I leverage this process better instead of just teach me the process.
Yeah, yeah. And in this sort of coaching environment and coaching conversation, the outcome of the coaching call is something that the coachee takes away. And so what are you going to do as a result of this call? Like, what are you owning? And then that's
Mm-hmm.
where the accountability comes in, right? Now you've set some clear expectations about what you're expecting from the person or what they're expecting themselves to do. And then you can hold them accountable. Uh, it just sort of goes full circle when you have a really solid coaching conversation
Right.
that, again, has the space for people to be vulnerable, to say, I
Mm-hmm.
don't know, I don't understand, I need help,
Mm-hmm.
help me understand, whether it's anything to
Well,
do with the organization. Yeah.
and for leaders, I think having the coaching conversation helps a leader surface some of the things they don't realize they know, right? That
Mhm.
that they don't see because they've been in it so long and it's so close that they're like, oh, can you parse how do you strategize for this event or this situation, right? Which might be a coaching conversation, and they don't realize what they go through. And so I think it's helpful for leaders to understand what they do know, because when they're setting expectations, it, it becomes easier to get clearer on what you're asking people to do or why you get frustrated with people, because you've begun to parse a little bit of your own skill set, and you can say, oh gosh, I'm looking for some relationship building with this teammate or this guy I'm leading, and he has a really hard time doing this. How do I do that, and how could I help him, because I don't have that problem?
Mhm.
Which is helpful. And
Right. And
so
so it becomes about, curiosity is a word that we use a
mhm,
lot of, right? And so
yeah,
it's not going into a conversation with, I know the answer. It's going
yeah,
into a coaching conversation with, I'm going to be curious about the person in front of me, and help them
right,
through asking a series of questions that just make them think a little bit differently. And that's a skill in itself, right? Again, it's that
yes.
ensuring that you're open to what people are saying and that you're being curious about what they're saying to you and how it impacts them and how it impacts others and things of that nature.
Yes. Yes. And I really like, I've been working with this Hoffenberg framework on learning agility,
Hmm.
that when you look at leaders as coach, what are some of the areas you're going to push in on for your people so that you've got sort of an understanding, and learning agility is proving out to be one of the best indicators for success in leading, for success in your growth professionally, that kind of thing. And
Hmm.
so there are 9 dimensions in this model around learning agility, and I'm going to just run through those real quick. One is when you're coaching your folks to push in on interpersonal risk, right? What are the things that discussing differences, talking about how do you learn from others? Coaching in and of itself is a little bit of an interpersonal risk, because you
Yeah.
have to say, I don't know. You have to say, I'm willing to learn. And to really kind of examine, how do you think about things, and how am I different than my teammates, or whatever that might be. So that's one piece. Performance risk. How are you doing
Mhm.
things differently? What activities are you taking on that you've never done before? How do you tackle a problem in a way you've never attempted to look at it? Um, Pushing experimenting. So a lot of assignments from a coaching perspective are run an experiment, try this, try
Yeah.
saying no to the 10 meetings that are conflicting on your schedule. Try saying, right, like what are some of the experiments that can prove out whether things are working or not? Collaborating, right? How are you leveraging knowledge across the sector? That whole building something with other people, building on things, not just cooperating, but collaborating. Information gathering. Where do you go to get information? How do you source ideas? How do you source knowledge? How do you source what you need to know to get your job done? How good are you at doing that? Um, obviously feedback seeking, right? Getting how's this going? Coaching is a great place for feedbacks,
Totally.
right? Let's talk about how you're doing this. Um, reflecting. Does the person you're coaching reflect? Do they take the time when you send them off into coaching? So the coaching assignment thing, when between the sessions you're having and they're going to run off and they're going to do an experiment, or they're going to take some kind of interpersonal risk, or they're going to do whatever. What is the self-reflection that happens in addition? Because the self-reflecting is the cementing of the learning. The
That's
self-reflection is the deeper knowledge. Speed. How quick are you to take action, right? We had the conversation and it's 2 weeks and you still haven't done what? Like, why are we even talking, right? So speed, and then flexibility. How open to new ideas? And that's as much for the leader, right? All of those dimensions as it is for the coachee.
Mm-hmm.
And those are, I find that's a really great framework to see. And where you've got resistance on any of those is opportunity.
For sure. For sure. I particularly like the self-reflection one, going out with what am I going to do? And what did you learn from it? I always say from coaching, it's, from my perspective, we're helping creating awareness. And I want them to go back into the battlefield, as it were, and try it. And what did you learn from it? And did it work? It didn't. And so try. But the important part is to think about, it's not just do it, but to really reflect on it and make change it, or just sort of cement it or concretize, as some might say, that into who you are as a leader, right?
Yeah.
And so I love that. I think it's so important on so many levels.
Yeah. And because the first thing you do when you start from a coaching perspective is you do a little self-reflection with the person. Where do, like the questions that I put into a one-on-one are those things around what's working, what are you excited, what do you know, where you've got momentum, right? What's not working, where are you hitting your head against the wall, where are you dropping it, where you feel like you're completely unprepared, where are you frustrated, and getting them to really understand and vocalize, and what is that for you, and how are you handling what's not working is the
Right.
second part, right? Because that's where you're going to start to target in on how they think about it, what the opportunity is for the learning and development, like what they don't know and how they think about it. And it becomes an obvious conversation, right? It's not a hard mining for data.
Right. And I think it should be a pleasing conversation for both. But I want to just take it back up a notch, because transforming an organizational culture is not an easy thing to do. And so you need to have buy-in. You need to understand why it is. Like, why are you going to make this coaching, leader as coach, sort of transformational change? And it has to be articulated. And so really getting clear on that. So internal conversations is not just the flavor of the day. It is a wholesale change for a long term. And that affects many things. As you said, it affects the leadership competencies in which that we're looking at people, the lens that we're looking at people through. It involves the conversations, the time that it takes in order to coach versus manage. It affects
Right.
many, many things, but articulating, getting clear on why you're doing it is going to be really that first step in order to make it successful.
Right. And the time pressure, right, is, I think, almost false, in the sense that most people come to do a good job. The engagement is all about the learning and the growth. And the illusion that it takes more time to have a conversation, it takes more time to create this space. It doesn't take any more time to have the conversations and create the space to do this capacity building than it does to do the rework, than it does to suffer through the errors and failures and have to do you know what I mean? To do the after action, what happened there, all of that's time as well. And so when you just think about, I'd rather have time developing and preventing those things than sustaining a culture where we're constantly failing or having to redo, or people are leaving and we are in a retrain all the time.
Mm. So what you're saying is time is not a barrier?
Time is it's a mythic beast.
It is, right? But we're so busy. And, when we're so busy doing stuff, it's hard to
Uh-huh.
say, it's hard to think about taking the time to have this conversation. But you're
Well, and I
right.
think
If you
part
don't,
of the pressure, right? So with a burnout, and I've got so much and everybody's maximum capacity kind of thing, if you don't slow down to really think, be thoughtful and intentional about how do we want to approach this and what are we doing to prepare ourselves and how are we girding ourselves for this challenge, we are going to burn out because that feeling of overwhelm, that how do I stop making good choices. I take it all on myself. I don't share capacity with others.
Mhm.
I think it's my responsibility and I have to do this. And so that's the recipe for burnout.
Right.
Making bad decisions for yourself because you don't think you want to burden other people, when if you do it together, it's always better.
Yes, collaboration, right? Or that's we kind of started out talking about as one of the key areas from a leader coach perspective is collaboration and teamwork.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
We have to
Different thoughts.
also, yeah. So sort of that you have to the why, but you also have to model the behavior, right? And so I think leaders that are in leadership positions today have to embrace it and get rid of that busyness and the busy talk and all the things that sort of get in the way. And they have to model it as being the way that they're going to change doing their business.
Right. It's a mindset shift for them,
Yeah.
right? I got to
Yeah.
think about it differently. And I have to be thinking about how do I think about it? And what are my own roadblocks? And what are the stories I tell myself about why coaching might be difficult, or that I'm not a really good coaching leader, or that's a word that I don't like. Whatever your story is,
Mm-hmm.
that's the thing. That story, how you're thinking about it is how you're going to show up in it. So if you're um, prioritizing outcomes over workforce, over people, that's your first issue. And you got to start
Mm-hmm.
asking yourself why you do that. And that's the conversation you have to have with yourself. Because if you can't let go and shift how you see what you see, you have to be different first before you can transform what the organization's going to do. Because how you show up is what's acceptable for others. And that's that gray space and culture of you teach your people what's okay by how you behave.
Yeah.
And if it's always results and not capacity building, and better results through better capacity building, then you're gonna get the culture you deserve based on the choices you make.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I want to go back to sort of my middle manager thought around that. So I'm a middle manager, and I think this is the right thing to do. How do we, as a middle management, sort of move the dial forward? Because if it doesn't come from a leadership perspective, it's hard, sort of, a middle management sort of to push it up. And have you seen that in organizations where there's been a sort of a groundswell where the senior leaders are still sort of command and control, and the ground is shifting upwards?
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen that happen in any of
Yeah,
your
I have
organizations?
seen that happen where middle managers come better prepared.
Mm.
They have said, look, this is not working for me, and this is how, they're willing, because you can lead from anywhere, right? Top leadership is just the guys who have been there long enough
Sure.
to take on the roles. And I think your culture really lives in that middle section, right? They're the ones who are pushing up, pushing down, pushing sideways. And so they have the biggest sphere of influence in a way.
Mm.
So, strategically, when you develop leaders, I'm like, always start in the middle, right? See
Yeah.
what the culture will do. And then the top leader goes, hey, what are they drinking? We want some of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And an openness, right, at that top leadership sphere to say, this seems to be working, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because
But
they want proof of
again,
concept in a weird way. Yeah.
yeah, for sure, right? Because they need the results, whether it's shareholder driven or not. They are results driven, and so all of this is if it's not producing results, but anything that you read, any of the facts that you sort of that you read along the way, and anything that they're measuring says that a coach leadership model is going to produce better results in the long term, and sustainability, because you don't have the burnout. you have people that are engaged and invested and happy.
Right?
And you have the collaboration, because it's not just managing your people through coaching conversations, but it's managing your peers through coaching conversations. It's having conversations
Managing
with
your teams.
your teams with coaching conversations. And it needs to transcend the organization, and everybody sort of needs to be rowing the same way on it, and if they're sort of pushing back as they see the other teams or the other departments flourishing, they're going to be saying, what do I need to do differently? Because I want that.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the coaching, so just the dynamic of coach, right? Coaching, your coach always comes in with a questioning perspective. Your coach comes in ready to listen, right? So when you think about why a leader as coach has a more positive impact in terms of some of the things business needs right now, is because you do need to listen. You are forming a new generation of workforce with all this green labor. Mm-hmm. And listening to them is important, because meaningful work is way more important for them. And your ability to hear what that means is going to be important. And that standing outside the event, right? The zooming out, like let's stand back out of this for a minute. That's a coach perspective, as opposed to being down in it and all invested. And that ability to zoom in, zoom out as a leader creates a lot of effectiveness, because you can see deep enough, but you can also stand back to say, wait, we've got decisions that are going to impact in a broader way, and how we're thinking about this, and getting people to understand how that works so they can do it in their own realm, I think is create speed.
It does create speed, right? And so all leaders and managers need to think about this differently, right? They need to shift their perspective, look at it from a different angle, to say, if we do this, it's going to give us more, as opposed to, if we do this, it's going to drag us down. And, Marcus Buckingham wrote a book called Love and Work. And, we want to have people it's an and, right? We want to, love being at work and love being at home, but it's not giving up one for the other. And when people are seen, and people are heard, and people are innovators, and people are part of the conversation and part of building something, see where what they're doing is contributing to the success of the organization, that creates a place where people love to work. Yes. And that's what you want. Positive engagement.
That's right. Because positive engagement will always give you better results. Always.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we want our people to be leader coaches, right? Leader as coach. We want our organizations to think differently about what coaching means. It's not the widget conversation. It's not what did you produce and what didn't you produce, and what are you going to do differently next time. It's to really let the coachee guide the conversation about what they need to be more successful in their role. That doesn't mean that you're not going to have difficult conversations or crunchy conversations at all. That does not mean everything's kumbaya always, right?
No,
not at all.
Yeah, but you're at least more willing to listen and more willing to hear, and that makes all the difference. And letting go of coach, because coaching is a thing, and yes, there's a lot of training and certification and yada yada yada, but when you lead you don't have to be a certified expert in coaching. No. You just have to be willing to create capacity for others to develop.
Yes.
However you do that, uniquely you.
Yeah. If you are a CEO of an organization, top leader of an organization, a leadership team, manager, whatever you are, when you go back to your office space on tomorrow, have that conversation about what it would mean for your organization to transform their culture to a leader as coach philosophy, and how positive it could impact your organization. See where it goes.
You'll never know unless you try it. Experiment.
Yes. Awesome.
All right. Well, hopefully that was some tips, some clarity, some information, some ideas around how you can shift out of your command seat and into your coach seat and be better and help your organization grow faster.
Excellent. Let us know if you have any feedback. We'd love to hear from you. If you've tried it and experimented and have anything to share, we'd want to hear. So please drop us a line.
Drop us a line. All right. Thanks. Nice to talk to you, Sandy.
See you then.
Thank you so much for listening. You can check out Sandy's website at satoriconsultinginc.ca. That's SATORI consultinginc.ca. And visit Jen's website at own-up.com. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.